All right, so this is a drum set mic'd up for the most part. Gonna go through, I guess, a few different things here and kind of hopefully help you get a little more familiar with what's going on. So I guess we'll start with the drum names. This guy right here, that's the kick drum or the bass drum. This is kind of the big guy. It's the one with the pedal. That's why they call it a kick, because you kick it. Here's the snare drum, kind of that rat-a-tat-tat sound or whatever. We'll go to these drums. This is your high tom. This is your floor tom right here. And then cymbals, you have your hi-hat, and that's broken. Okay, perfect. Crash cymbal and ride cymbal right here. And then you have your sticks, obviously, and then the seat is called the throne. So those are just the drum names: kick, snare, high tom, floor tom, hi-hat, crash, and ride. I don't play with a middle tom. I just don't do it. Sometimes there'll be a tom right in this area here. I'm a big proponent of this setup right here because I think it's the most ergonomically correct, and a lot of my drumming idols drum this way. So yeah, that is the drum set. When you're setting it up, you always want to make sure that the snare drum is right here between your legs. It's kind of the focal point of everything. So yeah, that's what it looks like from that angle itself. As far as the mics that we're using a couple out of a kit. So we have a Lewitt drum mic kit, and the first one, this kick drum mic, it's the great big one right here, and we use this little tiny stand, and all these stands will be in the studio. We have these are kind of like tom microphones. They usually you'd want to use a Sennheiser 421, but these are just the Lewitt versions of those. This is the Lewitt version of a Shure Beta 52 or a Shure D112. We have some Lewitt small diaphragm condenser microphones for our overheads. They just come in that kit as well. A lot of times you'd want to use Shure SM81s, but this came in the drum mic kit that we got. I have an SM57, a Shure SM57 for the snare, and a Shure SM57 for the hat. So let's kind of talk about how we position all these mics. We'll start with the kick drum. The kick drum I have just stuck kind of in front of the sound hole here. It's one of those things where if I were really going to record this for an album that I was going to put out, I would probably put 3 different microphones on it. I'd probably put one right here. I'd probably put one on the back side, and then maybe one even inside of the drum. But you know, usually one will suffice for the kick drum. So literally just kind of shoving it in front of the sound hole. You're gonna get different sounds. You could stick it like over here on the side of the head. It really just depends on what you want creatively. So yeah. As far as the snare, we have our snare mic here. It's kind of one of these medium stands. And when it comes to drum mics, you typically want to point them about where the drummer is going to hit. And you can see that 57 is angled probably about where the drummer is going to hit, because most drummers will play in the center of the drum, kind of depending on what the application is. But you'll notice that 57 is pointed just right there, kind of at this area. Keeping in mind with these mics, you can change up the way things sound if you want to get super creative. You can point them closer to the edge. You can point them more straight down. You can point them more across. The more straight down you put a microphone, the more punchy it's going to be, where it's going to mellow the tone out a little bit if it goes in from the side like this. But I'm really going for where the drummer strikes the head. This is called the beater head, and this is the resonant head underneath here. Same with a kick drum. That's the beater head that the pedal is on, and then the snare head, or it's not a snare head, resonant head is on the other side. For this hi-hat, usually you'd probably want to use a KSM 44. We're just going to use a 57, and I have just stuck it underneath it about, an inch or so away from the hi-hat. That way we can get the clapping of it as well as the drummer striking it. With these tom mics, the same kind of thing. I'm kind of pointing it at where I think the drummer will probably hit, kind of at an angle. So far the mic stands that we've used is we've used this little tiny one that doesn't angle for the kick. We've used a medium-sized one for the high tom, the snare, the hi-hat, and the floor tom as well. Next, for the overheads are going to be your small diaphragm condensers at the top. I personally like to run my overheads just about at the same parallel level. Some people will tell you that they want one lower or higher, and that's fine. It's all personal taste. I personally like the symmetricity of this setup. Is that a word? Symmetricality, symmetricity. The purpose for the overheads is really to pick up the ride cymbal and the crash. That's the primary reason, but it's also going to pick up kind of some of the overall sounds. And we use big stands for these. You just don't want your overheads pointing inward at each other. You'll get phase cancellation. You want them either straight up and down, or you can set them in the middle and have them pointed outwards. But the way I have this rigged up, the way the stands work, I didn't have that option. Okay, so that is the microphones that we use for that. The angles where you stick them. The angles vary so much that really, I mean, you can get 1,000 different sounds out of one microphone just by positioning it differently. So that's all creative. Let's talk about how we keep things tidy around here. So a tidy setup is going to be a functional setup. You're really going to be thankful if you keep your cables in a nice orderly fashion and not a bunch of cable spaghetti. So typically you're going to have excess cabling. You see all those coils? Keep your excess cabling at the microphone. That way you don't come over to this snake, the snaky little slithery snake, gonna catch me in my mouth. Anyway, that way you don't have all these coils at this stage box right here, because it's gonna be messy. These happen to be here just because that's where the microphone stands are, but always keep your coils at that spot. So you might have to actually coil stuff and then run it to the snake in order to make it behave. These cables are a little bit funky. It's pretty tidy. They're just a little bit kinked. So when you're wrapping these cables around the stands, you want to make sure you have nice, sleek cabling. Some of these have clips on them, but I like to use the knobs on the stands to make these cables really kind of run through. This one didn't have a cable. That's kind of a bad example, but I did run it around there. You don't want the cables just draping around everywhere. So yeah, this one has a clip that I didn't use. Put this bad boy on here. That's not the side that goes on. That's not it either. This might not be the right clip. Yeah, there it is. And that just keeps that cable sucked down tight. Same with up here on these overheads. You don't need to wrap it around 1,000 times. You just want to make that cable run with the length of the stand if you can. And then I have a little clip down here that kind of secures it into the coil and then over to the stage box. So always keep it tidy as you can. You might have to coil it and then clip it into the stage box, or plug it into the stage box. Don't try to plug it into the stage box and then coil it, because it's not going to work. These cables have to be able to turn to let out that weird slack. As far as the numbering goes, you're always going to want to run this stuff in the same order. Kick, snare, hat, high tom, is that 4? Floor tom, left overhead, and right overhead. That's just the standard drum order. So yeah, keep it tidy, angles, drum names. What else do I want to talk about? Oh, don't let the microphone stands, if you can prevent it, don't let them touch anything. We don't want stands touching each other. We don't want stands touching drums. You'll notice that there's no place that these stands are touching, because you don't want extra sounds going through the stands, so don't let them touch. And that's why these mic stands are so adjustable. They have here's 1 in and out, 2 in and out, here's where it pivots, and up and down. I mean, you can really manipulate these in a really customizable way so nothing touches. Don't ever let drum mics or any mics touch the instrument. And then we'll talk about how to sound check. So you want to make sure that your drummer is playing as loud as he's actually going to play during sound check. When you're playing, this is so hard to record this and do it at the same time. When you're playing, this is about the speed you want to go at. And then the sound guy will be like, okay, kick drum. Hi, Tom. Oops. Floor tom. And then they'll say cymbal work, which means do some cymbal stuff. Actually, they might check your hat if they have a hat mic. Not everybody mics the hats, but that's the speed you want to play at. And then they'll probably usually ask for the whole kit. Stick. It's kind of challenging. Okay, so that is the main setup for drums. Okay, all right, let's go check out how we have it laid out in the studio. Remember, you need to know what input you plug what into. You will probably have your headphones coming out of one of these so that the drummer can hear the click track or the music or whatever. So this is an outie in this sense. Let's do. Oh, you aren't. Oh, jeez. Okay, let me get the password in here. So, how you doing? Okay. So when you're in Pro Tools, you're going to want to rename all of your tracks. And this is the order you're going to want them. Oops, I probably should have put overhead left. I like to have it all spelled out. When you're naming this stuff, this is where you might talk about what types of microphones you are using in the comments. I mean, if you don't care, you don't care. But positioning, especially like say I were to be really recording this for something special or whatever, I'm going to have 3 kicks. I'm going to have a couple different snares. I might have 2 hi-hats. So you really need to make sure that you're labeling well. But this is your order. Kick, snare, hat, high tom, floor tom, overhead left, overhead right. Coming in here, I like to always use, so number 1, we probably just always use as our condenser mic or whatever. I like to use 2 for the talkback mic because you've got to have a way to talk to the drummer when he's in there. So then when I come in here, I'm going to find the corresponding output. So I'm going to put like 1. I'll go back here and try not to scratch the desk. But all of these, I don't know if you can see these, they're upside down. This is all the different inputs. So we have, here I'll unplug this too. We have the capability of doing 6 mics in here. So we're going to do, let's see, where's the ways to go? Yeah. So kick, snare, blah, 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 all the way through. This is actually 3. So even though you're doing input 1 on the snake, because that's the input that you plugged it into out there, you're going to plug it into 3. You can do any number you want. It really doesn't matter. But you just need to remember which is which. And then finally, we're going to have 1 more input, and you could run that into this bottom one. That's why I bought 2 of these interfaces, is so we could do full-on recordings. So you could plug it in either 1 or 2 up here, or there's still a plethora of inputs in the back on that second interface. The tricky part is, guys, remembering which you plugged into and then which input to tell it to on the machine. If you want to switch it to the ADAT, which not a lot of us ever use that because we just use a vocal mic and that's it. All it is your ADATs are all down here. Okay? All right. And ADAT's just that lower unit. Trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, that's really about it as far as the drum setup goes. Word.